All right, looks like we are live. How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to another episode of Sasquatch Alex Petkov. I hope everyone is having a great Monday night so far. It's always a great way to break up the Monday blues, I suppose you could say. So thanks everybody for your well wishes. Obviously, last week's show was a little rough. I wasn't feeling too great. I had some kind of a stomach bug. Might have been food poisoning, something along those lines. I'm totally fine now. It was like a 2-day thing. Monday was the worst of it. So I was really lucky enough to have Carrick St. Laurent of Crash Course Cryptozoology help co-host the show. He did an awesome job as always. Carrick is great on the show. We love him on here. So that was fun. Just a reminder, if you haven't seen other shows, check it out. There's a playlist on the channel with all previous episodes. Got some really awesome guests coming up here. Last week's show was with Joshua Cutchin. We were talking a little bit more of the paranormal side of things. Really awesome. As I said, unfortunately, I wasn't feeling great, but we still managed to have a good time with it. So next week will be a great show. We're going to be having on Josh of P&W Maps. He's got an Instagram account. He's done a couple of interviews before. He is a data scientist, I believe, and he uses Bigfoot data from the BFRO database and other databases to make maps. And I helped collaborate on a map for New Hampshire with him, but he's done other states as well. So really cool to see that. We'll talk to him about using like raw data, just sightings, plotting on a map, and talking about statistics and everything involved. So that should be really exciting, excuse me. So as always, Granite State Bigfoot, Beyond the Trail, the Granite State Bigfoot case, it's up to like 120,000 views at this point. I'm pretty blown away. A lot of new sightings from New Hampshire. Really interesting for me to hear that. So if you haven't seen that, there's a link in the description as well. That's over on the Small Town Monsters channel. We're coming up here. We're going to be filming the main episode soon, starting filming actually next weekend at the International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine, interviewing Lauren Coleman and Michelle Soulier, who's been on the show before, way back when I first started talking about Bigfoot in Maine. So a lot of cool things coming up with Beyond the Trail. We're going to be talking a lot about that in coming episodes. But let's get to tonight's guest. So tonight's guest, we're joined by Matt Larson. You may know him as Central Florida Bigfoot. He's got a YouTube channel, a really awesome guy. He is actually, he's worked in the media for 36 years as a professional photographer. 24 years of those were spent with the Tampa Tribune and 12 with wfla-tv News, Channel 8 in Tampa, Florida. He's only been into Bigfoot for about 2 years, and he blames his partial knee replacement for everything. So that'll be interesting to ask him about that. So while he was recovering and out of work, he got addicted to YouTube and the Bigfoot craze. His goal is to get the next P&G video and believes that having the right camera for the job is key. He's known for his work with plastic toy cameras, which were made in the 70s, the Diana camera, which uses 120 millimeter film. His work has actually been featured in numerous museums and private collections. He's got a museum collection in both the Tampa Museum of Art and the Polk Museum of Art in Lakeland, Florida. So that's pretty awesome. It'll be awesome to talk to Matt. So without further ado, let's just bring Matt, aka Central Florida Bigfoot, right in. How are you doing, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome to have you on. You kind of caught my eye, I think a couple months ago. I was getting ready to go down to Florida. This was, I guess, back in the winter, and I was looking around and I had seen you comment a couple times, I believe, on the show, and I knew you were sort of in that Florida area. So always interesting to talk about Bigfoot in Florida, skunk ape, as it's sort of called down there. So definitely wanted to have you on. I saw my buddy Mike, Tactical Bigfoot Research, teamed up with you when he went down there. So Mike's an awesome guy. So a friend of Mike is a friend of mine. So here we are.
Yeah, Mike's an awesome guy. He reached out to me too when he was doing a trip down here, and of course my wife is like going, so let me get this straight. People just reach out to you and you say, yeah, come on, and you go out in the woods with them, and they're probably carrying knives and weapons, right? Yeah, pretty much. But he looked okay. I saw him in a couple chats. He's all right.
Right. Yeah, you got to do. I guess that's the good thing about the social media side. You can do a little search for people's, make sure they're somewhat normal. I guess at least what it looks like. Hopefully they're not catfishing. But that's how it goes with this field. You meet people online. They either turn out to be really weird or really weird in a good way, and you end up being a good person. So
I totally know what you're going. But hooking up with Mike for a morning outing was probably one of the best moves I ever
Awesome.
made. And we went out with Tim, and he brought so much to the table. I mean, I have limited knowledge. I'm new at this.
Sure.
Like you had, what was it, Joshua Cutchins on last week?
Yeah.
Man, what a like a encyclopedia of knowledge. I don't know any of that stuff. I try not to watch too much because I want to be focused, and I don't want to
Sure.
have, these pre-notions of what something is. And I don't know if you watch too much of my stuff, but early on, like I said, my channel's only about a year old, and I don't shoot myself. I'm not like the other guys.
Right.
My camera's not on me. I'm not doing a documentary, and I'm basically doing photojournalism style of shooting. So it's run and gun, never turn the camera off. And it's basically just watching all the channels and going, we could do that better. Okay, we could do that better. Oh, they turned the camera off. Okay. So, and I'm caught now. I'm caught between you and Justin's work out west on the documentary versus photojournalism, and my head's in a warp. And then listening to Joshua last week, and then hanging around with Max Powers. I got to go out with Max. He's in the chat. We did a little Bigfoot camp out last month and had about 10 people show up.
Nice.
And for 5 days, and it was just a mini 5 days, but we all did different trips. We all did our own thing. We all hung with whoever we wanted to hang with. But again, sharing information, no holds barred, just everything on the table. And you walk away learning that much faster. I do anyway. So I'm all about working with people. I like that.
Oh, totally. I agree. I mean, that's what's great about these types of things, just having conversations.
Yeah.
Especially you're obviously in Florida. I'm in New Hampshire. Mike's in New York. The Olympic Project is out west. There's people in Justin's in Canada. Like there's so many different people in different areas. So what's interesting is learning about the differences between the areas, talking to people in those areas. What are their experiences? They're obviously dealing with different types of terrain, wildlife, everything. So it ends up being a lot different, especially, if you have plans to go to some of those places. It's cool to have connections like that. So definitely really awesome. I see there's a lot of great people in the chat. Yeah. Max Power says, I've never been here before, here to see Matt. Hey, Max, how's it going? Sandra says, this is a good channel. I appreciate that, Sandra. There's a lot of awesome folks in the chat, though. Hello, all Long Island fan. What's going on? JD Sedona. Obviously, Mike there. Hello, Matt and Alex. What's going on, man? A lot of great people in the chat. Awesome. Everyone's having a great time so far. So, as I always like to start out, you obviously in your bio, you mentioned a little bit that it was kind of your knee replacement that got you into it. But where does the interest in Bigfoot come from originally?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. And I've heard you ask that so many times, and I go, you got to prepare for this. You got to prepare for this. But I'm used to co-hosting.
Sure.
I'm not used to being the focus of this thing. So it really started, like I said, with a knee replacement. And I had 5 weeks off of continuous 5 weeks off. And you can't pretty much leave a chair for about a week other than when the evil nurse comes and makes you stand makes you stand up and bend it and do squats at the kitchen sink and stand on one leg, and they go, just rock back and forth, and you're rocking back and forth, and she goes, okay, now freeze on the left leg. And I went, no, I can't do that yet. And they go, yeah, you can. And then you do it and you realize you can.
Pushing you a little bit.
Yeah, it was rough. I mean, it was like a year and a half for me to really trust the knee again. And so we always went out hiking and that sort of thing. But during that knee replacement, I got time to say, what is YouTube? You hear so much about it. And I went on there and just started plugging in things I did as a kid, Loch Ness Monster, all of the fables and that we heard about, and Stonehenge. I was really into Stonehenge. Always enamored by the pyramids and Stonehenge and ghosts. When I was about 10 years old, I had a cowboy walk into the room when I was sleeping, and I was with two friends. It was a sleepover, and we were about 9 years old, and oh, wow. and it was crazy, and we all saw it. Well, two of us saw it, and then the one never woke up, but. So I was always into that. And then I always had this weird connection with photography with Matthew Larson. I thought, oh no, I'm going to get drafted and die in the war. And,
oh no.
So I had this fear from like 9, 7, 8, 9 of knowing what my destiny was in photography. It's really weird to say that, but I always thought I would get drafted. I always thought I'd be a war photographer. I always thought that, that's what it was going to be. And then I got into life after death stuff with the spirit exiting the body. And I think it was the late 70s, Duke University did a thing where they were some photographers trying to capture the spirit at the moment the spirit left the body.
Right.
And it was, I was really into that. I mean, they released a major motion picture, and I'm pretty sure it was Duke University. So my wife is telling me to look in the camera, but I have a secondary camera, so I really can't do that, hon. So quit texting me. So anyway, it was all of that. It was going into YouTube and just researching everything I liked, and discovered Bigfoot. And man, I went down the rabbit hole hard. I really went down it hard, and then just started picking it apart. As a film guy would, as a photographer would. What are these guys using? Why do we not have a clear picture? Why is it there's no pictures of Bigfoot since Patterson Gimlin? And what's going on here? And the more I dug into it, I realized that we are using the wrong gear. Professionals aren't in the field. We have people that want to find Bigfoot, but they don't want to take a camera class. So that is my pet peeve. And in the last 3 months, I know, and people in the chat, I do not mean to offend anybody when I say this, but if you're out there researching and you don't at least have your GoPro or your iPhone on a stabilizer, you're just going to frustrate yourself, and you're just going to push more blob squatches out into the market.
Yeah.
And we all know that we have too much. And I'm sick of seeing it. I want to see people out looking for Bigfoot. I want to see Bigfoot again captured on film. And I realized that it wasn't going to happen unless I got out there and did it, because we're not using the right gear. And I mean that lovingly. I'm trying to, my mission is to get everybody using a gimbal. So since I've been preaching it, I've had at least 6 or 7 people switch to gimbals. I've had two people buy my complete setup with the AK4000 gimbal, and I'm shooting with a Panasonic Lumix FZ2500. So I think it's the best Squatch camera out there. I haven't seen one better. I haven't seen anyone doing the moves and stuff I can do, from shooting a footprint and then rise up and shoot wide and have just pinpoint focus achieved pretty much the whole time. And Alex, I was into the Sony gear. I was into the Cannes Film Festival, and everyone the independent film makers are shooting with Sony, the Sony A series. And I had all that. I had prime lenses. I had the 50, the 70, the 105. I had 5 prime lenses and 2 or 3 kit zoom lenses, and the whole bit. And when I got into Bigfoot, it's just like, there's just one day I walked in. We don't have any camera shops in Tampa anymore. So I had to drive to Orlando.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's nothing in Tampa. No art supplies, no camera shops or anything. So I had to drive to Orlando. My wife said, there's a great place over there called Colonial Photo. And I basically took all of my gear, and it's in mint condition. I mean, I keep my stuff really nice. And I just pushed it on the counter. They go, what do you want to do? And I went, I take it all. And they go, what? You got Sony here. This is nice stuff. And I went, I don't like it. I almost got fired using that stuff. The autofocus was not good. It could be operator error, but I doubt it. I'm pretty good with stuff like that. Sure. But I put it this way: I'm not having that trouble with the Panasonic. So it's night and day difference. I'll take my Panasonic over the Sony any day of the week. So, and that's really it. I just went for a camera that I thought would be good, and it's straight up Bigfoot. That's all I care about.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I just switched over to the Sony. I'm in the A series now. I was using Canon. So I think we may have talked about it at some point in chats, but no, it's it's interesting. I was kind of with a Canon. I was on Canon for a long time, and I was, again, coming from more of that filmmaker perspective, where I'm trying to get good content and good pictures. Especially when you're running gun style as I do. It's very you want to have something that's just going to work. And I've just been using the Sony. Right now, Sony A7S II, and I really enjoy it. It's great, and especially the low light capabilities. For when we're filming around a campfire or in the dark, it's a little nicer because we're not only out there looking, but we're trying to kind of capture the experience for folks, and that's like in the recent Granite State Bigfoot case, one that just came out, it was like 11-degree weather. So you want to have the gear that's just going to work and not give you fuss, because it sucks having to take your gloves off in 11-degree weather to try and keep adjusting stuff. So, but I totally respect what you're doing. And I think it's good because, as you mentioned, we're just inundated with blob squatches, terrible photography, stuff that's blown up. I mean, even people with their phones, just taking it, and like, there's pretty decent stability on some phones. I don't understand. But again, I mean, when you're out in the woods, it's tricky if you get excited or whatever. I get it, but awesome to hear that you're switching people over to gimbals. I think we need to hold everyone in the field in general to a higher standard.
Exactly.
And we need to raise the standard. A lot of people run audio. Like whenever I'm out in the woods, I just run audio. People get used to doing that. So why not getting used to maybe running, GoPro or something? I know a lot of folks are starting to run at least GoPros. I mean, that's better than having to pull your phone out in the last second and try and capture something, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of room for that, but I think what you're doing is awesome, and we're definitely going to talk more about that gear side. But I just wanted to ask, when you got into it, were you aware of the skunk ape phenomenon in Florida?
No, I and I hear this in every show. Bigfoot's only out west. It's Washington. It's the Yeti. It's always out west. And I tell you, the first channel I landed on was Colorado Bigfoot, actually, and he got me thinking about several things. But the idea of using a bridge camera with the long zoom actually came from Mark Abel, and my affinity for structures. And following structures and the logic behind that also came from Mark Abel. But then there's a turning point where, with any researcher, you're going to take a narrow vision of what they see or what you're hearing and say, okay, sure, I can go with that lane, but not any of this. And then, you go to the next person, you go, okay, I like that train of thought, but I don't necessarily go with the rocks. I don't believe in the rocks, or they don't do anything for me, because I used to hike, or I've always hiked, and rock structures and the rock pyramids are, you see them everywhere. They're trail markers. They've always been trail markers. People make them, kids make them, people make them by the rivers. So I don't put much credence in them. Yeah. Unless I was at a campsite and then I walked around the river, camped around the river, fished around the river, and woke up the next morning and there was one. Okay, that's a totally different context. But for the most part,
going on, yeah. I mean, we call them cairns. That's what we call them up here in the mountains. Because especially for example, here in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, when it's winter and there's 7 feet of snow on the trail, that you have these 8-foot tall cairns that get built. When you're hiking up there in the winter and the trail's gone, all you can see is the tip of the cairn. So that actually becomes very useful for not dying if you're stuck out there in a snowstorm or something. So people make them all the time. Like, I agree, I see them stacked all over the place, and a lot of people make a point to knock them over, but people like to make that. But yeah, that is interesting.
Well, even on Mount Katahdin, I'm a big AT fan.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
I have every book ever written on the Appalachian Trail. So that was a lifelong goal until the knee went out, and then I went, okay, that dream's dead. I'm not even going to attempt it. But I did do 5 or 6 days out of the Smoky Mountains with my brother. Had a great time. Life-changing, just being in the trail and seeing the shelters and seeing the old shelters versus the new shelters, with the open cages. Some have the cages and they're just rat's nests, and then some are just beautiful log cabins, just freshly built, and they're changing them over. And so, and the people you meet and that sort of thing. But it was a little spooky out there still, we had 5-6 days out there, and it wasn't all Disney World.
Oh yeah, I mean, the Smokies are great. It's interesting, myself having hiked most of the mountains up here in New England, northern Appalachians, and you have Smokies are more further south, but it's all the same mountain chain. I did back in high school on a survival trip. We did like 3 weeks out in the Smokies, and we had a couple nights where we're hanging out doing fire watch as we have our group of lean-tos, and hear something crashing in the brush down below, and at the time, all we had were, pocket knives, and we're, kind of gripping them like, what is going on here? I wasn't even really thinking much Bigfoot or anything at the time. It could have been bear, all kinds of stuff, but it's interesting. So have you been in Florida? I mean, your whole life? Are you a Florida guy or ended up there? Or
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 8, so pretty much southern Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky,
Okay, gotcha.
and we do say Louisville, by the way,
Louisville, yeah.
not Louisville. But it's actually New Albany, Indiana, where I was born. But I'm again the youngest of 8, kind of a Brady Bunch family. Dad
Gotcha.
got sick of his family, threw a dart at the wall. It was just family overload. The story goes he threw a dart at a map and he hit close to Tampa, and he said that's where we're going. So I've been here since I was 6 months old. Never lived anywhere else. Elementary,
Right on.
junior high, high school, college, grad school, all right here within 30 miles.
It's a beautiful area. I mean, I got to say, I'm not a huge fan of like the extreme humidity, and I'm sure you're used to it. But I asked just because of the whole mountain thing, so I can imagine. It's like when I go to Florida, it's. I love the terrain. I love the swamps. I was just down there in. I was telling you in January, and was in Ocala, a bunch of these places, and it's just so different than up here where. It's almost weird when I don't see mountains for me. It's like when I'm in the Midwest or down south, it's kind of like, it's a little strange, but it's beautiful. And I love the terrain and, palmettos everywhere and bald cypress, just such a very cool looking area for sure. I especially love the Tampa area. I've been down there a bunch of times.
Oh man. Well, you get, next time you're down here, give us a shout.
So. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's for sure. But, we actually had, I think it was, Max Powers was here saying Appalachian Mountain Club uses them to mark trails. Yeah, that's what when we're talking about the cairns. And then folks were saying about JP Sedona says if you have to draw on the picture to show others what you have, you don't have anything. The red circles, the infamous red circles. Well, don't you see the 3 Bigfoots here and the red circles all around it? Yeah, that stuff is that's just crazy. I mean, if you're doing enhancements, it's one thing, but it's just so hard it's such a stretch with those red circle pictures.
Yeah. And, and the biggest misnomer out there is people think because they're using a GoPro or one of those new 360 cameras, that it shoots 4K. So they go, well, I'm shooting 4K. And, and I don't know how to explain that any differently than I do, but 4K with a poor sensor and 4K with a bad lens or bad optics is still bad video or bad photography, So, and I know because my artwork is done with a crappy camera on purpose. The Diana cameras are plastic cameras from the 70s. I thought I had one here, but they're just plastic toy cameras. They're like $15. But what's cool is they shoot 120 film. So there you go.
Yeah.
That's your 4K. But guess what, guys? It's still a plastic camera. The image out of it is super soft, is dreamlike.
Right. And that's the style you're going for.
And that's the style I was going for. So, I just wish, people understood or would take a camera class and just realize 4K. I don't even shoot 4K. My work is not 4K in the field. You don't need it if you have a good lens and a good camera. I'll take 720 DPI also any day of the week with a good camera and a good lens and a good sensor over 4K with, and people they don't realize that either. So, and I tell people, if you're using an iPhone, don't zoom on it. I teach an iPhoneography class. That's the other thing we have. And I was going to mention that briefly is, my wife and I have an Airstream. And so we travel as Box Photos. It's boxphotos.com, boxphotos.com. And it's basically billed as 2 photographers in an Airstream. So that's where you'll see both of our fine art work. And my wife is the real deal. She's in like 6-7 museum collections all over the world. Awesome. She's in numerous independent collection, corporate collections. She's won the most Florida Fellowship grants in the state of Florida, emerging artist grants in the whole 9 yards. So we bought an Airstream to use a mobile studio. So that started it for us about 10 years ago. We launched Box Photos Airstream, 2 photographer Airstream. And it's all to talk about photo processes and iPhoneography and salt printing, wet plate collodion, which is interesting. I told the Matthew Brady story, and now I'm actually doing wet plate collodion. So my dream is kind of going that direction anyway. But yeah, so we use the Airstream as a vehicle and as a mobile studio, and we've promoted ourselves pretty heavily, via Box Photos Airstream. And it was going good until about 2 years ago, and she's online here in the comments. But until I got into the Bigfoot, she's let's just say we're a family divided right now. I've never had more fun in my life, trying to figure out for myself if this thing exists or not. But I listen to everybody. I watch everybody's channels, no matter how crazy they could be with rock stacks and tridents and all kinds of stuff. It's, you still got to hear it, I think, file it, and just, choose your battles, or choose your logic and your train of thought. And I'm very logical and methodical how I think. I've always said I'm not the sharpest pencil in the shed, but I do have built-in logic circuit board,
Right.
that I can call BS on something pretty quick. And so that's what I use in the Bigfoot world. And I'm just trying to, I believe this thing can exist. I can understand how it can exist. You look at the country, you see how much is uncharted, unmapped,
Right.
and all that. I totally get it. There's a lot of stories out there are totally believable. There's a lot of stories out there that are not totally believable. I'm not into the woo camp at all yet, and I've had people say, "Well, you're only 2 years. Wait for it."
Right.
That sort of thing. So, but I hear everything, and I like what Carrie Arnold states on Bigfoot Odyssey is just, if the awareness is there and you're aware of these things, or what can happen, or what people have said about certain situations, you're going to be that much better when you or I encounter that situation.
You're more
And
mentally equipped. Exactly.
you're mentally equipped, and logically, that's a good plan.
And
I would
that's,
rather have a,
yeah, with a lot of people. I mean, that's why you have so many of these traumatic experiences, because people that have spent their entire lives in the woods, hunters, whatever, have an experience with something that they're told is not supposed to exist, or they just don't even think about it. It's not like if you run into a grizzly out in Alaska, sure, it might be kind of scary, but you're kind of expecting it, or at least you should be. I mean, if you're preparing yourself, something like a Sasquatch is not on any, wildlife guides are not talking about it as something to be cognizant of, especially, if it's just, it's considered to be a joke as widely it is in society. Oh, Bigfoot, it's, kind of a pop cultural thing. So I think when it comes to the visual side of evidence, the problem is you have such an oversaturation in the market, when it comes to consumer grade photo and video equipment. Everyone sees, oh, 4K, this is the new one, it'll be great, I don't have to do anything with it, it'll just work for me, right? So it's interesting because people, talk about taking survival courses or learning how to track. These are skills I would say definitely, if you want to go out in the woods, and just in general, not even for necessarily Sasquatch, other things, know to identify the trees and different types of animals in your area, carry a field guide, that kind of stuff. But as you mentioned, they don't really think about taking necessarily a camera course. I mean, you can learn a lot about your equipment just through YouTube videos, tutorials. People make entire channels dedicated to reviewing gear, and at least learn how to use the equipment you have. I don't know. That's the way I kind of look at it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, the camera I use, there's a British guy, and this is what I'm using. Do I even have a battery in it? Yeah, there you go. I don't know if you saw that, how the lens comes out.
Oh, yeah.
It's very important with the bridge camera that this happens. And the reason why I went with this model is that's all the way out. So, and it has a Leica lens on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's nice about this is it's a 28 to 480, 24 millimeter to 480. Then it has a digital aspect. And I tell everybody, scratch the digital aspect. Don't zoom on your iPhone. Don't, just, you're better off shooting a full frame with your iPhone and enlarging it after the fact than trying to use that digital zoom. So So I tell everybody that. Well, what's nice about this, Alex, is that when you put this on a gimbal and it's riding on a gimbal, I can actually walk on a gimbal and zoom. And I'm zooming now from 24 to 480. But what is the lens doing? Nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything's happening internally. So this thing, once balanced, it's balanced. So I can be walking and go from a 24 millimeter all the way up to almost a 500 on a gimbal, stabilized.
Amazing.
So that means I can walk with the camera zoomed in at 150, 200 millimeter. Think of it compared to the GoPro. That's basically a fisheye. Okay. Yeah. If something steps out on a GoPro, and say you got a rear mounted GoPro on your back, and it's basically 16 millimeter, close to it, 18. Make a print. Just do this for me. have your wife, friend stand 30 feet behind you, 40 feet behind you, and make an 8x10 print. Blow it up and make an 8x10 print of their face. That's why you don't use those cameras that way. So I walk with this thing. It's as simple as that. I put this thing on a gimbal. I ride the gimbal on my shoulder. This thing's riding behind me. It's zoomed in 150 yards, and it's just literally floating. And I had that on a video coming up. I'm going to release my next film probably next Saturday. I usually go live Saturday at 9, and I'm going to put some pressure on myself, but I'll probably do it as a premiere at 9. And I show this thing in action as a rear-facing camera. And I even make a joke to Mike, like, hey, and, you know, I probably shouldn't say that. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I just make a comment, hey, Mike, this is the proper way to do a rear-facing camera. Because it's zoomed in so much that anything that's out there, you know, I'm going to get. So it's just a matter of being in the right place. So put me in the right place, and I'll get you your Squatch video. So
that's, yeah, I love the way that you're thinking about that. It's, I mean, I've seen videos of people having like a bear run out on the trail in front of them with just the GoPro they're filming. And it's just, it leaves a lot to be desired. So, you know, your equipment is very important. And if, you know, people are very serious about trying to get something, you know, as serious as running audio, why not run really good video too? I mean, I suppose running a GoPro or a phone on a gimbal is better than nothing.
Yes.
But still you can, because, you know, there's people that just go out there and will do nothing. And, you know, it is a hassle. You have to clear, if you don't get anything, it takes up space. You know, if you're recording a couple hours of you just walking around in the woods, you know, that can take up a lot of space. But still, it's, if you want to really get serious about it, I think it's important to, you know, document what's going on out there, that you have the times and the dates stamped in there, everything. So it's just, it's nice stuff to have for sure.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of people do this, but, you know, I try to, there's a video I thought I may have had queued up for you, but we found this nest over the weekend. It was really just a tree blowover. I mean, it was 100% tree blowover, but if it wasn't a nest, it was a missed opportunity for a Bigfoot condo.
Okay.
I mean, it's literally 7 bears could be in this thing.
Do you have the video? If you want to show it, we could pull it up.
Yeah, it's just a crazy find in Florida. Let me share screen here and see if I can find it. It was video 149. This one.
I can just pop it right up. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump to the good part, which is right about
that
here.
is huge, Dave.
Right there.
Wow.
What kind of?
I've never seen one pull up like that where there's like 7 trees involved.
Yeah, that's like a little island almost.
It's crazy. It was totally crazy. That's Bigfoot Dave. He's in Florida. He's
Hey, you mean the forestry department?
Look at that. Who wants to go in there? Wow. Christine, there you go.
Okay, Christine. Take this recorder. Here. Wait. Go in there with this.
Look at that. Yeah. That's spooky.
You want me to take the recorder and go in there?
If you don't come out an hour and a
I'll
half.
take your picture.
I always believe ladies first. It's just the right way.
Wow.
Got to have some fun when out in the field, right?
Wow. That took a heck of a
So
force.
basically, this thing, when it fell over,
We're friendly. We're just hanging out.
it took about 60 feet of grass
Good thing it don't
and
see
just,
the track.
or 30 feet, because the thing's about 20 feet high, we
Come out and
estimated,
play checkers.
and just laid completely on the ground. And that inside is 6 feet wide by 22 feet long, and you can stand up in it.
Right.
You really
It
just
is-
got to get in there.
I mean, that would be interesting. I'm sure wildlife probably lives in there. Putting like a trail camera in there, probably see some critters going in there.
Yeah.
Or,
Yep.
yeah, it goes the whole length, all the way down.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect spot to just hang out.
You had the weirdest expression on your face. When
And then Dave comes walking in the right side of this
Yeah.
Should I
frame
say
here,
yes or no right now?
and you get a
I
scale.
did. That's exactly what I was
Can
thinking.
you imagine the sound this made when it came down?
If a tree falls in the forest,
Yes, it does make a noise. It has to. You can't go against the laws of nature.
I know.
Something's going to hear it.
This is worth looking at.
He's got me stuck with
Let me
it.
see if I got my power light here.
So anyway, that's pretty much it, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely interesting to see down in the train. I was that in, if you don't have to say which area it is, obviously, is that in like somewhere in your area in Central Florida, or is that?
Yeah, it's literally an hour. I live like blocks from Tampa Stadium.
Okay, cool.
So it's probably 55 minutes up in Pasco
nice.
County. So as you know, University of South Florida has Lettuce Lake Park, and the green belt just starts, and it goes up north, Hillsborough River State Park, Lower Hillsborough, Upper Hillsborough, and then shoots across the state into the Green Swamp, Colt Creek, where there's a lot of research groups out there. So it's just a long stretch, guys, of 8 miles wide by over 100 miles long. And it's just a river running through it. It really is. And there's places where people have not put a foot down yet. I mean,
I'm sure it's just inhospitable kind of area. I've been to Lettuce Lake Park, actually. Beautiful they have the little raised area where you can go up there. And I was taking some photos of cranes and gators sticking out of the kind of the little leaves and stuff in the water. It was really cool to see that beautiful area. And it's just, people get surprised, I think, that aren't from Florida. Do you maybe want to talk a little bit about that before we take some questions about just Florida, like the wilderness, how much space there actually is in Florida? Because people I think a lot of people, especially up north, think Florida is just beaches and, resorts and that kind of stuff.
No, it's like, I'm serious. I mean, there's places that you can go right up I-75 and 275 where 75 and 275 come together, and you just start going out there, and left and right it's just woods, and you're in the woods, and you maybe walk 50 yards, you're in a swamp, and then the swamp goes 100 200 yards, and you come out of the swamp, and then you're in the woods, and then you're back in the swamps. And I tell you, I'm not into the what's private land and what's not private land yet, nowhere to go, but there's so many places where I have just been driving, and where my wife is driving, and I'm looking left and right, and I'm seeing structures. I mean, it's just, to me, someone said it the other night. It may have been Carrie Arnold, said something like, in Florida, they have nowhere to go. Yeah, we're all built up, but when you start getting into Bigfoot and start looking at the swamps, you don't realize how much of Florida is still untouched.
Yeah.
And that's what's crazy. There's all these pockets of multiple acres of 50, 60, 70 acres of just wildness. That's just crazy. From the old, mining and phosphate mining and turpentine industry. There's abandoned cabins out there. There's old roads. There's these railroad trusses going across these rivers where you can still see these pillars and stuff. And people haven't gone out there in 50, 60 years. And then what's crazy is you'll find these old homesteads, and then you'll see orange trees like out of nowhere. and you think about it.
Middle of nowhere, right?
Well, you kind of learn that when you start seeing the orange trees, look around, there's probably a structure. You're probably on an old homestead, and that's what they planted. It wasn't that this orange tree just, randomly just popped up. And usually, I started watching a channel, Florida Trailblazer. There's a guy.
Oh my God. I was actually just going to shout that out because I watch his stuff too.
He's a hiker, and he goes out there, and he educates people on how much of Florida is still out there. And I've tried talking to him a couple times, but he never mentions Bigfoot, but his head's on a swivel. If you watch him, he's like,
oh, totally. He's a really interesting guy. I've watched, I think I started watching his stuff when I was prepping to go down there last January, and I've been subscribed, and I just saw the other day he posted a video. He rescued some hiker.
Yeah.
He's rescued cats out there. He's found all these old structures. Now, people have to remember, I mean, Florida back in the day, Prohibition, even before, a lot of people from the north that were, the bad folks, were hiding out in these swampy areas where, you go where you don't want to be found. So I've been watching some of his stuff, and he actually has had some Bigfoot stuff on there. There used to be a guy named Tim Fasano. I don't know if you've heard of him, from Tampa. He passed away a few years ago. I used to watch him when I was in high school. Guy who was like this big burly guy, and he's out in the woods like, I think I just had something near me. Really, it was entertaining, and he seemed like a very funny guy. But there was a video, I guess, where this Florida Trailblazer guy ran into Tim Fasano out in the woods, and it was kind of cool. I thought that was neat. But that's so funny. I was just about to mention that channel.
So there's a lot out here. There's so many places. I don't need to go more than an hour from my house.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding. And I'm finding you mentioned Lettuce Lake Park.
There's stuff there. Yeah.
I went to school at the University of South Florida, and I think I sent you a picture of of basically a field goal, what we would call a field goal with a floater on it.
Right.
And I think I sent you that photo, but that was shot at Lettuce Lake Park. And what's really weird about that is not only is it a blowover stuck in a fork. So imagine something 200-300 pounds that breaks and falls perfectly horizontal, 30 feet in the air. But on the backside, one side's cut, trapped in a fork. Okay, I got it. That can happen every day. But what's interesting is where it broke. It breaks like this. And see how my fingers come apart right here?
Yep.
This is broke and then uplifted and put back flush. So if you stand that back up, it falls back down. There is just no way that is natural. And it's 30 feet in the air in the middle of like a kid's park. Yeah. It's crazy.
It's really interesting. Obviously, you guys don't have like what we have up here, snow load, which I think a lot of what people think are bends and stuff. It's snow that it does happen. I mean, bears climb up into trees too, but Florida obviously the occasional hurricane, but when it devastates an area, you see widespread damage, right? It's not in such a articulate manner. Now, Joey actually writes in the comments, I've found at least 10 to 12 tree breaks 8 to 10 feet high in the green swamp. That's not that far from Tampa. And just from like a little bit of an outsider perspective, last comment about that. When you're driving through Florida, I mean, as you said, I've flown drones in areas. You can be in like a newly built residential cul-de-sac, cookie cutter neighborhood. Right next to it across the street is this swamp where there's gators and possibly Florida panthers living. I mean, I've seen videos of people's cats being killed by Florida panthers. Obviously gators in the pools. That's a pretty common thing. Snakes. Every day. Florida is a very wild state. And I think a lot of people that aren't from there have a conception that it's just like Miami, Orlando, theme parks, beaches. But when I was in Ocala, I mean, that was my first time really going camping in Florida. And it blew me away. I mean, I did that video a couple months ago on my channel. That was like a really great place to camp. We spent a few days in the Ocala National Forest, and we're just driving some off-road trails, and it was absolutely wild. I mean, there could be anything out there, and there is. I mean, from hogs to bears, deer, all kinds of stuff. So beautiful, beautiful state. So much different terrain, whether it's down the Everglades to like that pine brush kind of terrain up in Ocala. And I know even the Panhandle area, I know that's where Stacy Brown got his famous FLIR kind of video. And there's, a number of people kind of in that area too. So great place for skunk ape, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's a good place to be researching in. And like I said, when I got hooked on the, Mark Abel's channel and a couple others, mainly out west, it was a couple of comments. They said, well, basically it was one of those conversations. Well, look, if you don't believe me, why don't you just get off the couch and go look for yourself? And I'm like, I'm laid up in knee surgery. And when I get better, I'm going to get off the couch and go look. And so I literally just started going out, like looking for the forest language and trying to see if I can find a bend, if I could find a break. And I did, and I was successful the first time, and I was very skeptical. And I started seeing things, and I'm seeing the same things they're seeing out west, but much smaller. Like one thing I have here, Alex, is I'm finding 2 foot tall teepees that are always they all look like they're exactly 2 feet. They're 24 inches with a tall branch coming out of the center, bending over into the bend. Sometimes it's a true 100% bend with a pin. Sometimes it's just an arc that's not quite hitting the ground. I've seen and photographed probably 15, 20 of them. I'm seeing them in Kentucky. I'm seeing them in Georgia along the interstate. I photographed at 70 miles an hour. That came out great. It's on my Instagram channel. I see them in Florida. I see them in the swamps. I see them in the swamps with a beer can on the end, a blue beer can. Like you see blue comes up a lot in a lot of research or filmed, which, again, you take some of the logic of what if I see blue on a teepee or see blue in a nest, what people are referring to as nest, I at least know that has been found before, a blue ball, a blue helium balloon, a blue beer can. There seems to be a blue theme going in a lot of researchers' area. So I just file it. Do I think it's anything yet? Not necessarily, but I do file it. And when I see it, I can pull it. It's just data that I'm collecting in my head. But I'm seeing a lot of stuff like that. That's a lot of high strangeness. And going back to the box photos and the art, before I forget to say it, is what I'm doing is I've turned the Bigfoot project into a fine art project. So what I'm doing is I've always shot landscape with the toy cameras. My whole thing was I was shooting a plastic Diana camera from the 70s. Ansel Adams and Clyde Butcher is a big name in photography in Florida. He's the Ansel Adams of Florida. They always do the 8x10 cameras, f/64, set at infinity with, and they do the whole black and white thing. And so I said, well, what can I do different? Okay, I'm going to take a toy camera. Instead of putting it on infinity, I'm putting it at 4 feet. Okay, is it true 4 feet? So I took a string, and I grew up in the photo lab business, so
Sure.
I know how to test stuff. So I took a toy camera and went 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot on a string, set a beer can up, and went outside and said, okay, this camera focuses exactly almost 4 feet like it says. So then for a long time, I had a string hanging on the bottom, and I would set my camera on close-up mode, which is that almost 4 feet. And I did a whole series of landscape. This is what my museum work was, a whole series of landscapes shot at 4 feet. And I called them environmental portraits. So being a commercial photographer, I shoot a lot of CEOs and museum directors, Annie Leibovitz style. I'm not as crazy with the shirt off, but very casual, informal portraits. So I started doing the environment as informal portraits at 4 feet, treating the sticks and breaks and little things that I was finding as if they were subjects, as if they were people. Moving into Bigfoot world, now I've moved into forest language, and I'm just taking that whole series into breaks, bends, everything associated with Bigfoot and the Bigfoot language, from star glyphs to X's and the whole bit. I'm shooting everything I can get my hands on, whether or not I believe some are Bigfoot, some are not. But I'm turning that into a fine art project, and it's going to be called Forest Language. And the gallery talks, the gallery talks is going to go like this. I'm shooting forest language. These are bends and breaks out in the woods, blah, blah, blah. What got you started on it? And then I'll move into Bigfoot. And then I'm waiting for the reaction. Like, this is the language of Bigfoot. Some say this is the language of Bigfoot. So this is what I'm shooting, and that's the next project. And of course, it's going to be digital. It's going to be on Japanese paper. They're going to be extreme limited edition of like 25 prints. They're going to start at 500.
So cool, though. Wow.
Yeah. So hopefully someone will buy a print, and they won't know what the X means. They won't know what the bend means. They won't know what the star glyph means. But I'm treating them into black and white and putting them on rice paper, and they're going to be absolutely pretty cool. So that's my project.
That is a cool idea. I mean, it's you're not really implying anything with the project, right? I mean, people, they might find it. They won't have any idea, as you mentioned, that it has anything to do with Bigfoot. They're like, oh, this is cool. This is beautiful nature shot, cool little stick formation. But then if they're into it, obviously it also can appeal to them if they are a little bit on the awareness level in terms of Sasquatch or are familiar with the subject. So that's a really neat idea, actually. That'll be awesome to see come to fruition. Definitely keep me updated about that. Love to maybe have you back on to talk about that at some point. But
yeah, it's good. It's going to happen by the end of the year. I'm close to, as my wife says, when are you going to start printing this series of new work?
Awesome. So with that, I think we'll start taking some questions. We definitely have some questions and comments in the chat. So let's take Mike's right away. We've been talking about him. He's asked, what is the coolest thing Matt has seen in the woods?
Well, I would say that blowover this past weekend kind of was a neat little find. I mean, I was disappointed that, we didn't have prints by it. I was disappointed that we weren't seeing more signs, but everyone knows we had a hurricane that, several in the last couple of years come through.
Yeah.
And that one area where we were, I had never been there before, and it was really off a highway, but you can't really get into it, and nor could you really get out. It was one of those things where you go in on a trailhead and you could take the trailhead or just go left. And we went about 100 yards away from the road and straight to where we thought there was a river. And what happened is we never found the river, and the river was dried up. And when we crossed the river, we couldn't even tell we crossed the river. It was so dried up. I mean, we saw where, okay, this is a creek, but I don't think it's the Hillsborough River. Bone dry, but that's where that structure was. or I'm calling it a structure, but blowover. And
Sure.
but what was interesting, Alex, is that from that one vantage point, when you got up on that mound and looked out, there were like 7 of them, all within eye distance, 30, less than 30 yards away. You could count 5 of them, and they all had game trails going to them, which was really interesting. So they were being used, but there weren't no fresh tracks. I mean, it had been a while. And like I said, I think if it was a couple months from now, good water source there, I think it's going to be a different story. So we marked it. And the one thing I wanted to say, I started to say earlier and forgot, is when you're using an iPhone, a lot of people don't realize that you can mark GPS on your iPhone.
Yeah.
And so I use that a lot, as I will, even though I'm shooting with a Lumix now, and I vow never to shoot video with my iPhone unless it's just a simple live, but because of what happened on my channel of the video, that I always shoot an iPhone photo, and then if you scroll up past the photo, you get the map.
You can actually pinpoint it. Yeah, no, I use my phone actually for a lot of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Triangulating, finding good spots, just marking them, and then later on I can check it on Google Earth, and if it's a place I'm interested in heading or going back to. So really good advice, actually. So remember that, folks. You have an iPhone, take a photo, and then even if you don't have service, when you get service, it should roughly show you where you were, and that's a great way to instead of having to write it down or whatever. But this comment is from Kevin Hamilton, one of our Canadian friends and listeners. He says the majority of Bigfoot videos and photos aren't coming from Bigfoot hunters. I think it's mostly everyday Joes who happen to see something. We can't expect them to have killer photographic gear. Yeah, I suppose that's true. I mean, what do you think about that? Is it if we raise the stakes, though? I mean, maybe other folks will also follow suit. I don't know.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the dash cam videos and the family out on vacation and stumble. That's legit stuff. And to me, to tell you the truth, most of that is some of the more believable work that I'm seeing is the dash cam videos and the darting across and everything. So I have no problem with that. But I have a problem with 90 Bigfoot channels out of 100 just going out and just investing their time and energy in their channel and just not realizing that it'd be like, I don't know. I tell people, I can get people to use my camera just like Picasso can hand you his paintbrush, but it doesn't mean just because you have Picasso's paintbrush that you're going to paint like Picasso. You still have to do some homework. You still have to, and study. But when I watch your videos, like before we came on, I was watching your behind the scenes video on one of your latest ones, most current. And I wanted to see, what are they using for lighting? Are they using, C-stands? Are they, what are you using for a microphone? I saw you using a boom mic, and all that stuff plays in your arsenal. So all I'm saying is I just want people to pick up the game a little bit and just invest some time into doing, if you're called a Bigfoot channel and you're doing nothing but a shaky iPhone 100% of the time, I don't know. I'm going to stop watching a lot of that stuff. Like I've subscribed to everything right now, and I'm going to just start unsubscribing because at some point, I've seen it. I know what they have to say. I got their language. I know their point. To me, it falls under entertainment or real research. Or trying to do real research. And there's a line in the sand. And it's kind of like looking at a fine art photograph, walking an art show. And my wife and I do this all the time. We can walk an art show with 500 artists and say, good, serious. Okay, seller, just for sales, or just for subs. Okay, this is legit. They're trying to add to the knowledge here. They're trying to move the organization or the group forward. And I just think it'd be nice to see more people moving it forward than just making Bigfoot videos.
No, totally. And I think it's just in general, like I said, it's great to hold people to a little bit of a higher standard. I mean, often they say, the burden of proof is with the one who's making the claims, right? We're the ones who have to produce it. If we just have something that's, questionable or whatever, or just audio. And I've had that happen to me too. I mean, my latest doc is, primarily about audio stuff that we had happened because we weren't even thinking Bigfoot at the time. And I'm not even suggesting that maybe what was in the audio, but, had we been a little bit more cognizant of it, we probably would have done a better job. But, it was just a regular camping trip. We weren't really, trying to do anything, but I think that happens so often. back to that red circle stuff. It's like we've been plagued with the red circles and the pareidolia for so long now. I think it's time that we kick it up a notch. As technology gets better and better, some of this stuff is getting more affordable. Some of the stuff that, in terms of drones, all this kind of stuff, years ago, that was unattainable for most people. And now it's getting to that point where a lot of people can get their hands on this stuff. So if we push the research a little bit into that direction, I think we're going to come out with something eventually, whether it be FLIR or a good quality video, like you said, where you're able to, blow it up and actually get good quality there. It's not just pixels. You're not dealing with 3 pixels for a creature. So it's like, what can you really do? You can only enhance that so much. So if you have more to work with.
And I love it when people blow it up and they go, well, let me blow it up some more. Okay, I can see an eye. I can see a nose.
I can see the fingers curled. Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I can't see nothing. I've had so many people send me stuff, big names too, by the way, that go, what do you think of this photo? I went, 50-50. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying that could be a Squatch. But no, it's like 50-50. And they go, everybody sees a Squatch in this photo, and I'm sorry. I see what you think is a Squatch in that photo, but no,
you can see how
that's not what I'm trying.
Drawn.
That's not what I'm trying to do. And my favorite comment is too, like, oh, I had it right there. It was right in front of me, but there was a bush and twigs going in front of it, and it was right behind it. My camera kept focusing here and not back here, and I'm like, okay, well, there's manual focus. We know your equipment. Know your equipment. Just. Yeah, and guys, and I say this, but I'm helping a lot of people on the side. I'm not just, I don't mean to be sounding like a jerk and just saying this, but trust me, there's a lot of people I'm working with and behind the scenes that bought my rig, that I'm trying to learn the gimbal,
and that's
that
fantastic.
Are asking me questions, and I'm sharing more than I'm griping.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you have a very particular skill set. I can't speak. Skill set. So you're coming from that visual perspective. So obviously, someone's not going to turn to a Dr. Jeff Meldrum or somebody for advice on photographic equipment, right? He's got a very specialized area, whereas somebody else that's a wildlife tracker, they're more good at that than they are. But if we can maybe just push everybody a little bit into a better way, because we talk about the scientific method a lot, documenting what were the weather conditions like, where were you, all the important details for if you're in an area where there's activity or whatever. Why not do the same thing with the visual side of things? Because that's an important medium as well. I mean, it's not going to be the thing that proves Bigfoot, a photo or a really clear video, because there's always the element of manipulation, but it's better than nothing. And if you can back that up with audio and video, possibly tracks, I mean, you have 3 examples of evidence there that in some cases have been used to prove species or to establish animals that were out of their range or living in areas that were previously thought to not live in, with some apes and primates in Africa and other places as well. That's been the case. And obviously I think we're dealing with something that's a lot different than just a monkey here, but still it is, if we can have multiple fronts of evidence, like let's imagine if you got a handprint with DNA that you could lift from it, as well as a good quality photo. I mean, that's great there. You're having multiple things to work with. So as this comment says from Louisiana Patriot, the photographic equipment makes all the difference in the world from a viewer's perspective. True. I mean, if you're just simply watching a YouTube video, what's going to be better? Somebody walking around the woods shaking for 20 minutes and causing you a headache, or something nice and smooth like what you have with a gimbal? So awesome to see that people are going with the gimbal route.
And don't get me wrong, I still watch all the channels because I love the woods, and
totally.
I like looking at there's a hiker. Oh man, I wish I knew his name. There's a guy in Tennessee, Virginia, I can't remember, that hikes the LBL. He goes to all these places that a lot of Bigfoot people go, and he's just a landscape calendar photographer. He's an excellent landscape calendar photographer, and he goes out with 5 guys, and they have campfires they go on these 4 or 5 nights trip. They start with campfires. They have all this activity going. I am watching his video backgrounds like a hawk. I mean, I'm listening to what he's saying, but my eyes are all over his screen. And I've seen footprints in his screen. I've seen X's with a bend next to each other on his screen. And I'll send him an email and, hey, dude, you ever know anything about Bigfoot? You have a footprint when you're walking through that swamp, by the way. And he goes, oh, really? I got to go back and look. I mean, he literally had his gimbal like 2 feet off the ground on, and it was a GoPro gimbal, but it was so close. It was like 11 by 14 full frame image of this footprint while he was shooting himself walking in the mud, and he just like walked right over it, and it was a barefoot footprint, and I was like, whoa. And I can't remember what video it was in, but I did email him on it. So
right on.
So I love watching. I watch all of it. I don't care, but I'm just saying,
It's fun. It's fun.
If you're looking for Bigfoot, step it up.
Yeah, it's fun to see other people's areas. And like you said, we have people all over the country, all over North America, the different types of terrain. As JD Sedona here says, even if you do use cameras that are top notch, you can still take steps to improve the video as much as possible. I give you gimbals. Yeah, definitely. Gimbals are awesome. They're a lot of fun to work with, especially as a filmmaker. It's makes your life a whole heck of a lot easier, I'd say.
But then there's some that say, hey, Les Stroud didn't use a gimbal.
Yeah, and he's walking around in the woods with two tripods, and
and neither does Justin. But see, that's what I wanted to talk to you about.
I don't either. For disclosure, I use them on certain projects, but sometimes it's when you're out in the woods with a tripod, and like it's just so much easier to just throw the camera on the tripod, get a static shot. I mean, again, that's kind of it depends on what you're trying to do, because we're trying to document what we're doing out there as well. As opposed to just strictly, getting hours of video of the forest. And I mean, there's got to be a balance we can strike with that. But, we're a lot of the times we do that where we show what we're trying to do. And then, we'll take a break and actually start, setting up camp or whatever away from the camera just to get it done, especially if you're dealing with weather conditions. So it depends. It's a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah.
So Long Island fan Victor says, do you go out in the woods in the summer when Florida is very hot and humid?
Heck yeah. I'm out all the time.
Joey says, I live right by the Green Swamp and it is hard in the summer. Yeah, nobody said it was easy, right?
And I got to go out with Joey. He was on our camp out. So
cool.
Joey was in the group where we found, he mentioned it in the chat, hey, tell him about the Y branch. But there was this little stick no bigger than a couple feet, and it was literally a Y, and I had found it on the ground, picked it up and wedged it in a tree, which I shouldn't have done because there's a group of folks coming up behind me and I knew they would see it, and I said, I'll take it down. I went, I'll leave it. I'm a clown out there anyway. Everybody knows I joke too much. So I stuck it in the tree, but when I did it, I said, wouldn't this be cool if we had found it like this? And I put it in the tree. And then like minutes later, I don't remember, I'd have to check the running film because I'm not editing that project yet, but 5, 10, 15 minutes later, Joey walks up and we all look up and there's this big, exactly like I found a Y upside down, on a branch, much smaller, just balancing like this. One side was on one side and the other side was on the back side, and it came down, and it's probably looked like to be 40, 50 pounds. On no more than a 2-inch branch, and it's on my Instagram channel too. That was probably another crazy find. Like, how did that happen? Someone explained that to me, especially after I just said, wouldn't it be cool to find it like this? And someone goes, no, wouldn't it be cool to find it like this? And like they heard it, and that kind of messed with me a little bit. To tell you the truth.
Oh, totally.
It really
That's
did.
cool, though. I mean, it's interesting to find stuff like that. I've found, the whole structure debate is interesting because I think there's a lot out there that is, wishful thinking. I see a lot of these videos, too, where it's like in pretty urban areas and people are obviously finding either homeless shelter kind of built or kids fooling around. That does happen. We used to build those. But some of the ones that you find out in the middle of nowhere are a little hard to believe. And, we saw the nest sites when we were out in the Olympic Peninsula with the Olympic Project. I mean, there's like no way that was done by people. It would be crazy if it was the location where they were discovered. And that's like the key detail. So I think the whole structure debate is pretty interesting. I think there's definitely something probably to it. I don't know what degree, but you do get those reports from time to time of people finding something that you just can't explain in normal sort of way. But
yeah, I'm weird about that. If I'm in an area, if I go like say my wife and I go somewhere, and say we go to the Withlacoochee State Forest, just to throw something out there, and we go on non-Bigfoot hikes, and we're just going on hiking, and I can go a mile or two and not see anything that would be deemed Sasquatch or swamp ape or Bigfoot, and my excitement just kind of drops. Like, wow, and I literally hear myself saying, "There's nothing in this area." Like, I am so sold on the structures that if I went out on a 3, 4, 5 day and didn't see any structures, but we kept working in an area, in my mind, I wouldn't expect to see much. Because I think, and I have a background in archaeology, so I have anthropology, archaeology, underwater archaeology, physical archaeology. I mean, I've had the whole series. Humans do leave some sort of mark unless you're migrating or in transit. So if they're just using an area as trails, yeah, you're not going to see any structures or any markers or anything of any sort. You'll find footprints, but I don't expect to see things built. So it's not to say something can't step out in front of you or behind you if you're, got a rear camera. So I'm always alert. But what I do, my rule is I look for a series of things. I find a break and I go, okay, well, is that it? If it's one break, I don't think much of it. If I see a break or a double break, and then I always look out, is it pointing to something? Oh yeah, the video we just did on the camp out, 100 yards out, there's even a bigger break, like a double break pointed to a bigger break. So where the double break terminates, right there in front of us, 30 feet, there was an X on the ground. And a lot of people don't go by that, but to me, I went, okay, I've seen channels talk about this. So we go out and follow the big break. That's 40 feet up in the air, 30 feet up in the air, break, leaning, totally suspended. So 20 feet up, break, lands on another tree, in a fork, lands there. And what do we find under it? X. And when I start seeing coincidence like that start piling up, I do start thinking, hey, we're probably onto something, or this could be something. If I see one, I don't think much. If I see 2s and 3s, my eyes get a little more excited, and then I start looking for prints and start looking for hair, because I'm working Tim T's in the chat. So, and I learned this from grad school. You survive grad school by building the best team. So I'm a photographer and a presentation guy. I'm not necessarily the writer. So you got to find someone on your team that can write. Oh, and mathematics is the problem too in grad school. When you're going for an MBA, you need the math guy. And so I had the math guy on my team. So you build a strong team like that. So I just get concerned talking about other teams again, when you start seeing other teams and they've been around 20, 30 years and they still don't have a photographer. Like, you haven't taken the time to find a photojournalist or someone, and that who I would grab. Your photojournalists are going to be your run and gun guys that can think fast on their feet. I mean, we're chasing. Just look at the last year in politics. Get yourself a good photojournalist, and you're going to have a good team. But I think like that. I got Tim, who's a tracker. I go out with Tim. Big, tactical Mike. When we went out with Mike, incredible. He had the whole forensics bit going, and
definitely,
I mean, my arsenal is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But you have to look for those people. You just can't say me and Tim, or let's say Bob and Fred want to go out, and neither of them are photographers, neither of them are trackers. They probably couldn't survive an injury in the woods if one happened. And that's another thing, guys. I am way into the medical side. I'm researching everything from making sure I can start a fire, like watching Survivor, making sure I can survive, making sure I got the blanket, I got the compass, I got the whistle, I got the tick remover, I got the Benadryl. I got the Benadryl for snake bites. I watched the channel and they said you get bit by a snake. Exactly.
I always got this on my key because I found like 5 on me so far this year, and it's been really bad. But the permethrin and the deep has been used a lot so far. But no, I think a good thing as well is people can take wilderness survival courses. So this is something, or just a wilderness medical course, like they do them at REI. A lot of like outdoor companies will do these kinds of courses, and you go and it's like a 3-4 hour course, and you learn the basics, and that's really useful. As a hiker and a backpacker, I mean, we see a lot of stuff. People get injured, simple injuries that can make a trip where you're up in the mountains way deep miserable and life-threatening. Like something that maybe it'll happen in your yard, you'll be fine. But when you're 10 miles up a trail, it's either a helicopter or you're being lifted out by search and rescue. So that just the basics. You never know what can happen when you're out there, and just getting some of those basic skills. But not only focusing on that, focus on the photography area. And if you're doing a team, and that's what's been so interesting for me, knowing Mike, right, and the groups that he runs with, and Steve Coles and some of the guys in New York, a lot of them come from that law enforcement background. Being with the Olympic Project out west, they have people that are sound experts.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to rely on the sound guy to be, the one who's taking the photos and everything, right? That's going to be somebody else's task. So there's just different ways of doing it. And it's nothing wrong with familiarizing yourself with one thing, but don't become like a jack of all trades, master of none. If you got an area that you shine in, like you come from that photography background, that's a great place for you to start kind of helping people branch out a little bit, improve just what they're doing. So I salute you certainly for that. And as somebody who's, I'm content creator myself, visual filmmaker, I think we need more of that, because it'd be amazing the amount of times people tell me, like, how do you get such good video, out when you're out in the woods? I just tell people it's very simple. You just know your gear, know what you're doing, and just kind of, you can learn so much from YouTube alone. Just Google tutorials, whatever.
My camera has a whole YouTube tutorial on there, like 11 lessons from this British guy who basically broke down the Lumix Panasonic 2500. So he starts with turning on the camera, how the light meter works, how the different modes work, how to shoot video, what do your video settings mean? A lot of people don't realize that when you're shooting video, there is a frame rate you have to be at.
Right.
And what happens if the frame rate is off? And I wasn't into the video world. I'm a still photographer, which is the reason why I went with a bridge cameras, because I didn't want the camcorder. Although I love the fact that those camcorders can go a mile, zoom past two mountaintops, and then you pull back in, they're pulling back and they're pulling back and they're pulling back, and you go, what the heck is, are they shooting with? And that's when I started researching and learning about bridge cameras. So, and that's when I took the other stuff and said, no, not for me.
Right. Yeah, no, that's something that I think a little bit more in my wheelhouse, like with the Sony stuff, because, that whole video aspect. But Tactical Mike says, don't forget Clubhouse. Yeah, Clubhouse, another place we talk about, been on there too. We talk about just talking with other folks that are interested in other cryptids and other kind of topics in this field. And that you learn a lot of great stuff. Like we've been having on, I think he's in the chat. I think his username is Blue Daxi, but Mike's buddy there, biologist, awesome guy. I mean, he's a biologist, so he's coming from that perspective. So it's just great, and I think this is something that, in general, we need to work on as a field. I don't know, just the communication and cooperation as opposed to the constant competition. Now, there's people that I wouldn't want to work with because I think they're either crazy or way far out there. There's some nefarious individuals, of course. But there's a lot of great people too, and I've met and interacted with so many great people just through the show, or filming with them, or whatever, and just coming across them. So awesome stuff. I did want to read this one comment though from Max Powers. He says, "Alex, there are reports of people seeing Bigfoot building things in the woods of New Hampshire." Yeah, if you have any that I'm not aware of, I'd love to hear from you, Max. Obviously, New Hampshire is my home state, so I always love New Hampshire stuff. One of my favorite sightings was in 1979 up in the Ospey Mountains, and I interviewed the guy a couple of years ago. I don't know if he's still alive anymore, but he saw this creature inside of a stone structure with stacked rocks and had hemlock branches as the roof, and it was sitting inside the structure. And when he went back about a year later, he's kind of freaked out. He didn't see anything there. So that's the one I'm aware of. I don't know if there's any others, but actually the Olympic Project guys, one of the nests, they ran into something building the nest, and kind of freaked them out. And when they came back the next day, they were able to cast a handprint, fantastic handprint right there where it was. The nest was like half completed, so it was in the process of weaving this stuff together. So
wow,
it's really interesting. So there have been reports of creatures building, whether structures or nests or inhabiting things. I mean, if they're maybe just, I think a lot of cases, perhaps something people have built, you could probably use that. I don't know. I mean, it just depends what you have the luck to see out there, I suppose. But
well, I'm a firm believer going out with guys a lot smarter than myself. So that's what I try to do.
Totally. Yeah. You can learn so much from folks. I mean, people that have been doing it for a lot longer, or just like I said, just have a different skill set. Like I'm sure I'd love to go out with you and learn much more about, getting better at getting some of that video in terms of surveying the area and that sort of stuff. Because where I'm at, I'm like worried about the visual stuff. I'm trying to capture what's going on and give the audiences a sense of what's going on, but that's not the end all be all of what I'm trying to do. So.
Yeah, and that's what I'm struggling with too. Is I'm struggling. The photojournalist side of me is fighting with the wannabe filmmaker side of me, of liking Justin's work, what I'm seeing out west and what he's doing, and then what you guys are doing with the narrative. And I'm just that's my weakness, is the narrative. I was watching Max, Max Powers in the chat. He had a video there, and it impressed me that, he's like, oh, my video wasn't that, it was. He had a great narrative going. And I go into photojournalist mode where we don't add to the narrative. So that's been instilled in my mindset. You don't become part of the story. You photograph the story. You don't insert your bit to it. And the other thing I'm afraid about is the more I talk in my videos, the more I start sounding and saying nonsense, like this is a nest, 100%, and I got to catch myself. In my head, I'm saying it's a nest. But we don't know. We didn't see anybody build it. And so I'm a firm believer that I got to reel it back a little bit. And maybe I need to be looking for that filmmaker, mindset, of making, like, I forget to do time lapse every time I'm out. I'm a massive lover of time lapse, and I know how to do a good time lapse. And I've done it for News Channel 8. I've done weather time lapses all the time.
Awesome.
And there's a lot of people that don't understand the good way to do a time lapse. And the shutter speed needs to change on your time lapse. The key to a good time lapse is that 1 second shutter speed. You want that little bit of motion, because if you don't, you get a time lapse like this. You get a time lapse that's set at 1 or 2 seconds, and it's just this beautiful, smooth, movement. And it makes all the difference in the world just knowing that your shutter speed needs to be around 1 second. So going out in the woods, I was out there 5 days. I didn't do any time lapses. I mean, we're on the camp out. I didn't do one time lapse. I kept, I need to do a time lapse. It takes 30 minutes. I don't have 30 minutes. So you get caught up in it. So
yeah, well, I do love. I'm a big time lapse fan. I love doing astrophotography is an area I really enjoy. I love doing astro photos. I actually just have a background on my computer. I'll pull it up here. I have like recurring background photos on my other desktop, and this is one of my. Oh well, it's switched already, but that photo was one of my astro photos. And I love doing the astro time lapses too. And what I'll do is I don't do them as much because I'll leave it at night. I'll just leave the camera to go until the morning. Problem is, you're always getting a lot of that clicking. At least when I was using my Canon, so I'd hear the click. So if I'm trying to get audio too, it's a little bit tough. I have to sometimes pick and choose if it's a clear night. But coming back to that narrative aspect of it, that's what's difficult about it. I mean, as a filmmaker, obviously I'm trying to create a content for people to enjoy and find entertaining. So we're not documenting every little thing that we're doing. We're giving you kind of an abridged version of what it's like getting to camp, setting up, doing the research, and that's not, and people get angry. They're like, oh, I feel like you didn't do that much. It's like, well, this is not the end all be all of my research. I mean, I was just out in the woods now, checking my trail camera, running my audio and video. And if something happens interesting, I'm not going to upload every single one I'm out there. Cause I don't know. I prefer to have something substantive and then have all that backup data. But you're showing like an abridged version. A lot of times when we travel to some of these places, like we're going up to Maine here and probably California at some point, we're spending 3-4 days in a location. So it's not like we're there all the time. So we're trying our best to show you what's going on and show the audience what's going on, as well as trying to have something of our own happen. That may be futile because we're only in an area for such a short period of time, but that narrative side, afterwards we have to kind of weave it into some kind of a story and make it interesting. And I like to give as much information about, like I did the Ocala video about Florida, and I'm talking about, Florida, trying to give just some information about the state of Florida too, and then tie it all into, some of the fun stuff. But
I never think of that.
I think I see a lot of channels where it's, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of channels where they just, you're out in the woods and just showing like the daily a search, and that's fine. We need some of that too. You need a balance. Everyone can't just be doing stuff like that. Justin and myself and Small Town Monsters and others are doing. Obviously, we're focusing on certain areas to cover, and we're trying to cover as much ground as possible. But it's a little bit of a balancing game, I'd say. But I just want to say thank you, Peggy Curtis, for that super chat. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's there was a comment actually from Donald. I'm going to read this question. He says, Donald Fuller, he asks, Matt, have you been back to the spot that you got the possible face in the nest?
I was trying to ignore that question.
Uh-oh. Throwing you on the spot there.
No, that was shot in March. There's a video on my YouTube channel. If you just sort by videos and go back to about last March, a year, not this past March, but a year ago.
Right.
It's the one video I have where there's 12,000 views. Okay. So it's my 15 minutes of craziness that, I had owls. I had, an egret following me. I had a tree break literally as I was walking toward it 50 yards out and crash in front of me. I found a footprint. I found a nest. And then when I went back to see the video, I saw this profile of this black person sitting in a nest. And it's I don't think it's as much. It could be pareidolia.
Sure.
I see it as clear as day. It's a profile. It's as a matter of fact, it's on my channel header. You'll see it when you go just to my YouTube channel. But I think I may have sent you that photo too, Alex. But it's a profile set in the nest, and then 2 videos later, I did return to the nest where I took Joey from Bigfoot Mafia here in Florida. Not Joey, I'm sorry. Stan. I sent Stan from Bigfoot Mafia with me, and we went back to it, and it was in, 15 inches of water, about 80 yards off trail, this massive nest, and we walked up on it, and I came up from it from a different angle, and I didn't think it was it until I came around to the side and realized, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. This is the structure. And then when my camera goes up and looks at it, it's in water. It's in 18 inches of water. We're in snake boots. We're in a swamp. It's now flooded. 3 weeks later, it was flooded, or a month later, whenever it was. But there are 3 logs laying up against a tree. So it was sitting with its legs out, its back on the tree, and another big tree had fallen this way, and its feet were just like it was sitting in a lazy boy recliner is the only way to describe it. And in the nest, there's a big X on the outside of the nest. All the branches are up like this. And right here, there's let me rotate my hand. It's like there's a triangle. I had it there on the other one, but there's like a triangle window, and I zoomed in on a gimbal, 500 millimeters, and I'm running video. And one of the viewers said, timestamp, go back and look at it. There's something there. And I went, there's nothing there. I did shit. Again, high quality lens, good video. I did a still frame, brought it into Photoshop. All I did was lighten it, put a little magnification bubble on it. And it's to me, a clear shot of a head profile. So I have not, I showed it to Leon, or I think it was Leon or Max Powers. I think it was Max actually. We're saying, well, you need to get the artist rendition, the eyes, how the proportion of the face lines up, and actually drop that over that. And how does it compare there? And so we haven't done that type of analysis yet. Where's Bigfoot Tony when you need him? But
right, MIA.
But yeah, I mean, and I'm learning to do that, by the way. I've started watching a lot of his videos and the breakdowns and how he does these little, sections and then flips them to black and white, flips them to negative. So I'm getting pretty good with Premiere. I'm almost there. I'm not ready for a live, to break down a video, and I'm not breaking down anybody else's videos unless someone sends me something. And I have actually, someone sent me a trail cam photo of a Bigfoot walking by a trail cam, and I've actually seen it. And to me, it looks like a Bigfoot walking by a trail cam.
Is that the recent one that was on?
This has never been published.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's a behind the scenes. Nice.
It's a behind the scenes. A person sent it to me. It was jet black. The trail cam triggered late. The infrared went off late, which got me thinking. So it does make a difference if you're using high speed discs or low speed discs, and how that game camera is going to work.
Right.
And I never even considered that. That the speed of the disc and the firing and all of that. And I always thought it was in download and upload only or something. I haven't really got into that, but This one particular trail cam, in the middle of the frame, it captures movement. And I'll put my hand here. It picks up, there's a tree here. Something comes out from behind it. It moves. Infrared goes off right about here. And then you see good infrared and you see it go out. And so what I did is did a cut right here, brought the levels up to match. But when you did that, the grain and everything started happening. It started falling apart. But I was able to match it and then show the whole movement. And it kind of freaked me out. And I just simply edited it, sent it back, and said, yeah, it looks totally legit to me. But he's not.
That is.
So
yeah, no, I mean, I don't blame him. There's some people out there that, have talked about evidence that they've seen that are, it's behind scenes. I've seen some stuff too that is pretty interesting that I can understand why people don't want to put it out there. It's a lot of scrutiny headed your way. Not necessarily some people don't want to deal with it. Some of the best evidence may be behind closed doors. I mean, a lot of times we talk about a scientific study. You have people, for years on end that are collecting data. I mean, think this is a kind of a bad example, but when the government is building a case against like a mobster or something, right? It takes a long time for them to build that case until it's to the point where it's undeniable. So if you just release one, a kind of ambiguous video, you may get a lot of flack for it, as opposed to something a little bit more convincing with, you're dealing with tons of different pieces of evidence. So absolutely interesting. But I'm just getting into trail cameras myself, actually. I haven't been doing it for that long. Really interesting. I've had a lot of kind of interesting stuff happening. I actually got they're cool. And I've always kind of, with the Bigfoot subject, I've heard so much about it and people saying, oh, well, they detect the cameras, and there's evidence that deer, I mean, I have a video of a deer just looking right at my trail camera. Clearly can see when it seems to know it when it's going off. You can see the infrared. I mean, apes, there's evidence that primates in the jungles know trail cameras and will actively avoid them until they feel comfortable to confront them. And, it just gets kind of interesting. I actually just got a moose on my trail camera recently.
I saw that.
I wish I could pull up a video here. I would show it, but no, absolutely interesting. Yeah, I just went out today and was swapping the cards, so I didn't get anything, but I'm hoping to get something. Oh, I see Greg's in there. Greg Morrill, what's going on, man? And cryptozoologist in the chat as well. Yeah, a lot of great folks in the chat tonight. But no, it's been absolutely awesome talking about all this kind of stuff. Just on that note, since we were talking about trail cameras, what do you get involved in terms of trail cameras?
I have two. I have one I have successfully just used on our camp out last month and have, I don't know, raccoon or something attacking it. It's interesting. I'm also reading up and studying on more from a hunter's perspective of descenting, both cameras and myself. So it was not descented. I'm also, there's a lot of things, but this one particular camera, the newest one, I can set it up at home and it works fine. I take it to the woods, it's misfired every time. I mean, it doesn't even get me setting the camera up and leaving. There's nothing on it, like it's never tripped. And a lot of it, Donald asked, have I been back where I shot the face? No, that place scares the crap out of me. I took Stan back there, and that was a place in that video, and I don't tell too many people this, when all that craziness happened in that one video and I say I'm going to go back, I wasn't being super brave. I was basically realizing that, wait a minute, I'm here to photograph a Bigfoot. So if this tree pushed down or fall and the three owls going off and all this craziness happening around me is Bigfoot, I need to go back. But I also realized I was wearing a trail cam on my shoulder, a brand new one I just bought, the one that's misfired every time. So I went back, and I do something in my research of misdirection, because I hear a lot about mind speak and knowing your intentions and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So I do a little thing where, and I talk about it in this video I'm going to release, where 4 guys are walking down a trail and I just break off 90 degrees hard and start going a direction because of the whole thing of jumping a deer, a bear, or a Bigfoot or whatever.
Yeah.
So I keep my camera running and I do a misdirection, and I do it. I make sure I don't think about it beforehand. As soon as I think about it, I do it, because I don't want,
boom.
Yeah. And so I'll just shoot off, and I did stuff like that. So I set the trail cam up there. I went back, did it, whistling a game show tune in my head the whole time because, I was totally freaked out. I was literally shaking, put the trail cam up, had left it up 3 days, actually had dreams of me walking up on my own trail cam from the swamp, from the direction the creature would be coming. I was literally the Bigfoot walking up on my trail cam.
Wow.
And I had this dream of seeing it. And I remember my feet in the water. I remember looking at the tree. I remember keeping a tree, in front of me, and I was looking at the trail cam.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't get out there. I couldn't wait to get out there. Opened it up. And I tell you, Alex, I get so excited. I open up the camera and I go, it's on. I turn it off and I go, did I turn it off? Was it on standby? Did I ever move it off? So again, nothing on the cam, nothing. So I've had bad luck with trail cams.
I've had some mishaps too. I've been using mine for probably about a month now, and I just got it. I had used some trail cameras before on other projects, but I didn't really have a whole knowledge of it. And I had a bunch of mishaps where, I don't know if it was just not firing. I had it out for a whole week once on this game trail where I was finding moose, scat, and everything. I'm like, I'm gonna get something. I'm like walking out there. I'm so excited. That was my first full week of having it out there. I check it, no video on it at all. It wasn't even me walking away.
Exactly.
Like, what did I do wrong? So I've learned. I've had some weird stuff happen with the camera where we put food out in front of it and just the food's gone. I'll get deer and other animals, but you won't get whatever's getting the food. Now I'm not saying it's Bigfoot obviously, but I don't know what the camera's deal is. I mean, I had it out for a week last week and I got one clip the entire week and it was a moose going by. And I'm like, I know for a fact there were porcupine and other things that walked through deer. And I'm like, they were right. And it would have been in frame. So why wasn't it triggered? There was something funky with the camera, I suppose. But actually on that note, let me show that video of the moose here real quick. I just managed to pull it up. Let's see. Oh no, it won't let me because it's a MP4 file. I'll convert that, but it's an AVI file actually because it's from the trail camera. That's just the way it saves.
You can go to your webpage though, I think, and bring it up.
Yeah, I'm just. I was going to share the screen, but I'll just share the video file right here. Here we go. There it is.
That's awesome.
So got triggered just mid-step and was 5:14 in the morning. So definitely an early riser. Just walking right by. It looks like a pretty healthy moose. It doesn't have too much tick damage, at least from what I can tell from that clip. And there's the still of it. Obviously, it looks like it has a decent amount of hair. A bit at the top, maybe a little bit of hair loss because they get the ticks on there and they'll start rubbing off their fur, unfortunately, and the hair. So it's.
So again, this is exactly what happened in the Bigfoot video that I edited for this gentleman. Why did it start in the middle of the frame? What is causing game cameras to trigger so late when they have motion sensors or whatever they have on there? Mine at home, I can walk out my front door in a much farther out of frame than that, and it goes off at home all the time, but it won't go off. I don't understand that phenomenon. What's going on?
It's weird. I don't know. The one I have supposedly has 75-foot range, and I was just setting up earlier. Literally right before I got in for the show. I have it on this same tree, but I moved it a little facing left. So because there's a little bit of a better angle of this trail, which is like an old logging trail that the moose and other animals will use. I mean, as a game trail, basically, it's the path of least resistance. I've gotten deer in the same spot, and they'll just switch the angle. And I went as far back as I could because it does 3 test fires 15 seconds apart and it'll flash red. So I can tell that it's actually filming. And I stood as far back as I could and it managed to trigger it, but I had to be perfectly facing straight onto the camera.
That's weird to me. I'm wondering,
I don't get it.
Are you using one of those high-speed discs in there? Is it like a 10?
I don't know what it is on there. It was the one that came with it. It's like a Cabela's SD card, but I have put other ones in there and it didn't. I don't know if I didn't format them. I used like a regular card on there that I had, and it just didn't seem to work. I mean, I've just had some bad luck with it. I've had some good luck and bad luck, but I've only been using the trail camera for like a month, and I'm not really. I don't know if Bigfoot, I mean, if I get something like that would be interesting for sure, but I'm more interested in getting moose and some of the other animals because the moose in that area is definitely a highlight for me. So
Yeah. Well, I bought night vision, and it has infrared, and I had a comment on my channel when I was showing it one night saying, well, don't you know Bigfoot, sees infrared. And it's like, well, dude, I don't know if anyone can really say that. I mean, I agree with you, the deer and I've seen plenty of trail cams where they look directly at the camera. So that's a
Right.
fact. I mean, that's proven. But I bought the Equinox Z2, which goes 100, 150 yards. So you're going to tell me that a Bigfoot at 100 yards, 150 yards away is going to know that they're in range of my camera 150 yards away? See, that's the kind of logic, again, that you got to think like, yeah, I can see it up close, 20, 30 feet on a trailhead. You're on a tree and the trail's 30 feet wide. Yeah, I can see the logic like, yeah, Bigfoot knows not to walk through there. But are you telling me if I'm shooting across a lake at 100 yards, 150 yards, that they're going to know not to pop out of the tree line? Really? I don't think anybody on this planet can say that. So that kind of logic starts bothering me.
Yeah, there's some videos I've seen. I know a couple of them have been on Finding Bigfoot before, where they analyzed something that was, they'd get a deer right in front of the camera, and then somewhere in the background there'd be something kind of moving between the trees, and totally maybe could believe that they would just be kind of looking at it. But like this clip, for example, I'll share this one too. This is, I think I shared this one on the channel before, but this is the deer looking like right at the camera. So it's like when it's triggered, it looks right at it.
Oh, yeah.
And then it just keeps going about its business. He doesn't really care. He's just like, I don't know, he was hanging out in this area for a little bit. But this is the one clip I got where he looked right at the camera. And I had a turkey in one of them that was hanging out in front of the camera for like 2 hours. And I remember I was so excited. And I think I did that. That was when I did a live stream on this channel. And I'm with my brother, and I'm like, oh man, we got so many great clips here. And it turns out like 90% of them were this turkey. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Just this one turkey just sitting there the whole time. I'm going to pull that clip up real quick as we
awesome.
Start getting ready to wrap up here. Just got to convert them every time. Let me just pull that up real quick here. Let's see. Share video file, turkey. So this guy, he was just hanging out in front of the camera for such a long time. I don't understand what it was doing. And you can see it's doing the call. So I was just in the same area as I was mentioning earlier.
So you have the audio of the call too, right?
I don't. Unfortunately, there's no audio on this trail camera. I don't leave my audio devices out that long. I've left them out a few nights, but I need to invest in one of the ones that I can just put in like a plastic bag and leave it out there for audio wise. That's the next step. But like I said, mostly just kind of playing around with the trail camera here and getting some cool animal footage.
So I bought one of those HC1s or whatever, and I'm saving this clip, but I don't know if you heard. I went out on the hike on the camp out last week. Real quick, just a bad story is that because of some past surgeries and some meds that I take, it was an open heart surgery I had like 10 years ago. I didn't take a probiotic that I normally take with my regimen, and my stomach was just going off and going off and going off. And I was making all these ungodly sounds. And I just trashed this power line hike in the Green Swamp that I had waited over a year to take. I mean, I ruined it. I just literally ruined this hike. So I sent it to Mark and Larry at Beast TV. I don't know if they can bring it up. I listened to it today and chopped it up a little bit. And it's a little on the low side, but there's just so many things that, I'm out with, new people I've never met. And, I'm wearing I took my bear spray out. I put my new recorder here and I turn it on. And the first thing that happened to me is you hear this boom, 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 boom. You hear my mechanical valve.
Oh, yeah. Right.
If you ever need a heartbeat in one of your films, just call me up. I'll just stick it
heartbeat
right there.
Sound effect.
Oh my God. So that's happening at a couple spots. And then another part is just like, and it's like, oh my gosh, it was the most embarrassing trip I ever had.
Oh man, that's great though.
So yeah, I probably won't get asked to go out with her anymore.
Well, hopefully not, but that's funny. Peggy actually says might be ants all pulling together to move candy bars and apples, but going super slow so it doesn't trigger the camp. Right? Can you imagine? Just that would be
That's some creative thinking there.
Genius right there with the little ant movement. I can imagine. Yeah, it was just weird because we had meat out, some old meat we had put in front of the camera, and it was gone within the first night. And something had triggered the camera, and it was just there was nothing on camera. So it either have to have went by really quickly, or because I've gotten like squirrels' tails. I've tested it too, just setting it up like next to bird feeders and just having it run. And I've gotten like hundreds of clips of birds and squirrels doing all kinds of acrobatics on the bird feeder. But I seem to have hit or miss luck when I'm out in the woods, and hopefully now we'll get some more of that moose that's out there. So
that's interesting. I'm having the exact same problem. So I don't know.
Are they being manipulated with? That's been suggested as well. Somebody putting their big thumb over the sensor or something, and you can trick a camera. You can walk up from behind. I've seen game wardens do it on TV where they'll come up from behind and they'll take a hoodie and put it right over it and cover it real quick, and that won't be enough to set it off. So I suppose you have a team of Bigfoots. One puts their hands on the sensor, the other one goes and runs and grabs the stuff, and perfect heist, right? I joke, of course, but no, yeah, it's interesting. But man, it's been really awesome to talk with you. Would love to have you back on at some point, maybe talking about some of the other projects you're coming up here with, the print stuff and anything else that happens down the way, and would love to link up down in Florida for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate being on, and give me a shout when I release the next film I'm doing. It is very photojournalist style. It's basically, a day in the life. Nothing's chopped out. It's continuous roll. I'm trying to come up with a way to help it so it's not like watching varnish dry. But for those who can't get out in the field or know what being in the field is like, I think it really illustrates what we're doing out there. And I would like your feedback. So good or bad, and don't hold anything back. But I think the way I do the titles, like there's a lot of off-camera stuff and I have a bad habit of once Tim and I got movement, we caught movement at this place. And so now I learned my lesson. My camera's always up. If they're looking at tracks, fine. We're all talking tracks, but my camera's out. It's at the ridge line. It's always at the woods line. So then I realized I'm missing a lot of stuff. So what do you do with that? Because I didn't have B-roll. I wasn't wearing a chest cam and that sort of thing. So I'm looking at Tim T's footage. I'm trying to fill that in. But what I came up with is just a news style lower third. Mike's talking, or Matt's talking, Central Florida Bigfoot. And then I do a little camera's always up. I always have my camera up. I don't want to miss it. You're talking and then something scoots by. So, I'm just very hardcore right now with the full continuous roll, keeping my eyes up. And you talk about ridicule. I'm in the news business. So, what do you think I'm getting at work?
Oh, here comes,
Bigfoot
Matt, Skunk Ape Matt. Oh, you smell him this weekend,
Was that you? That just happened today. So yeah, so I get it.
Oh, it's part of it, and I've kind of embraced this point. People who know me obviously know I'm into this, so it is what it is. At this point, it's been a fun journey, just talking to people, meeting people, going to all these great places, and it's awesome to be able to do it. And we have a lot of really cool plans for this Beyond the Trail of series. Like I said, we're doing Maine coming up here. We're going to be doing Northern California and Oregon as well this summer. Possibly some other places out west. And I do want to focus on a lot of that out east stuff too, especially here in New England, where I think it's underrated. But
so you're a full-time filmmaker?
Not full-time, no. It's sort of still the passion here, but we're trying to move a little bit more into that direction. So fingers crossed. So we'll see. But I did want to read this comment from Tim T, who says, "I've had a camera moved away from facing at the food. It was behind the camera, fumbling with the straps during the middle of the night." Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I've heard people have their cameras pushed, knocked over, smashed, all kinds of stuff. You truly never know who did it though, unfortunately.
I've actually seen Tim's video of that. So the camera is on a tree and literally moved 90 degrees.
Wow.
And then they come back and the food's gone.
Of course.
So it's like,
I mean, some of these things, it's either one, there's really not a lot of possibilities there then, I suppose. I mean, unless a bear is that smart, it's either a human being or, something else.
Yeah.
That makes you wonder, but
good chat.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been great.
Thanks, guys.
Kevin Hamilton says, another great show, Alex. Matt has a common sense attitude and a technological knowledge of photography that more Bigfoot searchers could adopt. Definitely, I agree. And I hope that people will at least learn a little bit about getting better with their equipment. That's maybe the one thing you can take away from, this discussion with Matt. So totally. Peggy says, loving the East Coast Bigfoot shows, Alex, especially Florida, since it's my state. Thanks for an interesting show. Totally. I was looking forward to talking about Florida. It's one of my kind of favorite states, even though I'm a mountain guy through and through. I love, that Florida skunk ape vibe. It's definitely there.
Yeah, you guys got it rough in the mountains. I mean, it's just so vast, and you have to go so far. Yeah. Probably, it's just not. We have these isolated pockets, and
right.
I tell you, there's a patch of woods up Del Mabry Highway here, right in the middle of the city that I look at every day. I drive by and I go, man, that just doesn't look right over there.
I might check that out.
And it's no more than a couple hundred yards each way, maybe. And I stopped one night with my wife, and I pulled over and I shot the headlights in there, and it's like, man, I wouldn't walk in there.
Yeah, creepy looking, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, there's some spots that you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Well, I think Mike Tactical Bigfoot was saying earlier in the comments about gear. He's like, "Oh, easy for you because us mountain boys have to hike over mountains and stuff." And yeah, each area presents its challenges. You guys have the extreme humidity and the heat and the bugs and everything. So whereas we're going up maybe a cool mountain in the summertime, you got a whole different set of challenges. So every area presents a different type of terrain and challenges. Sandra says, thanks guys in chat tonight. Bigfoot Anon, great episode. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, but with you guys in the mountains, you can be seen from so far off. And I think someone said it on a channel the other night. In Florida, they got to get, it's so thick. I mean, any hunter can tell you elk hunting in Colorado is different than deer hunting in Florida. Sure. Colorado, you're using long-range rifles. In Florida, you're using shotguns with slugs in them. I mean, it's a short-range game, and it always has been. And so
totally.
They're much more on you. It's much more thick. They can be much closer than you think if there is something there. I actually show in the video where Bigfoot Dave is like 30 feet in front of me and walks behind a tree and just disappears. And I actually bring it up and said, watch how easily Dave just disappears by walking behind a tree and not moving.
Right,
I mean, the hair on when I was filming, I had my gimbal up 8 feet, and it wasn't even planned. He just walked in front of me and walked in front of a tree with a palm and stopped. And the hair on my arms just stood up because I realized, oh, okay. That's what they're talking about.
Right. And in reference to your kind of in the silhouette thing that you got, I mean, think about so many times I think about this. What if you're probably being watched by something that's so still that you can't even tell? I've heard of a number of sightings where people thought it was like a tree branch until it moved or until something happened. One of my friends had an encounter in Connecticut with something. He thought it was like a piece of a tree, and then it like sat up. And stories like that, how many times you're just being watched. And there are older stories that talk about these things being so stealthy they can stand next to a tree and hide, and you can almost walk into one before you see it. So who's to say they're not just watching you and observing and doing the statue mode where it's just the gargoyle statue.
I have something I would talk about in a future show. I don't know if you can see these.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if you all use anything like that, but in Florida, when everything's green, the last trip out, I'm wearing yellow. And so when you look at green swamp and you're wearing yellow glasses, it's like you opened up a full stop in a camera. You understand that. Not sure if everybody else does. It's like full stop click, and the contrast is like separated. So
you're getting a filter right there,
So it's more tech that I'm playing with, and I'm going to do a whole show on. These are Boston Bills yellow lenses. Do not get the polarizer on there because then you won't be able to see your gear because they polarize your camera screens and stuff right off. But this is full maximum UV protection. It's like I used to work in a film lab, so it's like 30 points of yellow. Your human eyes are looking at the green swamp through these, which you see a lot better. So your game is up, but your camera is still on whether you're shooting auto. I shoot on auto white balance. I don't throw everything on manual. But the fact that I at least may see something now that I couldn't see before is a game changer. And there's glasses like this for snow. If you're in snow, there's certain lenses you should wear. So anyway, I have a whole cheat sheet going down on I talk about lenses and filtration on,
and that's just another piece of gear to add into the toolbox, and it's a visual aid for yourself as well. I mean, if you like you're saying, if you're seeing something you might not be able to see in the natural camouflage, just about this subject, I mean, you're talking about these beings that are so adapted to this environment. If they're in these areas, we have to think outside the box to try and possibly trick them, but find an element that is the weakness in their natural defense, which they're so adapted to the environment. So something like that, combine that with the cameras, with 3D scanning apps, with lifting, prints off of something with like a handprint. We're really trying to think outside the box here, and I think there's a lot of great people like yourself that are at it, that are bringing particular skill sets, and that's what I love about these kinds of conversations. And I really thank you for coming on, and it's been awesome talking with you.
I appreciate it. Nice really getting to know you. And man, seriously, let's hook up. You come to Florida. We got
totally. We'll talk about that in a little bit here after the show. I'm just stuff I can't really talk about publicly, plans and whatever, so we'll talk about that. But
awesome.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much, everyone in the comments and asking great questions as always, folks. A lot of great people in the chat. Thanks to everybody who tunes in and leaves us comments and awesome feedback. Just a great comment, saying thank you. It really can turn a day around for sure. If you've been having a rough day or anything, it's just a fun way to do it. So if you want to check out Matt's channel, I have it linked down below, Central Florida Bigfoot. He does some awesome stuff. Definitely check him out. We will be having him back on the show at some point for sure. So he won't be a stranger to the program, that's for sure. So just a reminder for next week, guys. Again, we will be having on Josh of P&W Bigfoot Maps. So he's, I think he's a scientist or biologist by trade. I'm not sure, but he does like raw data maps. He'll put, like I collaborated with him on a map for New Hampshire. He's used a bunch of BFRO sightings and my sightings that I have in my database that aren't like online, that people have just told me, and plotted them and said, this county has more sightings this time of year. Really interesting stuff. So today we talked about upping the photography game. Next week we're going to talk about upping the data game, and then see what else will come along the way. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, guys, and we will see everyone next week. Take it easy, Matt.